It has been exactly 1 year since I left New York City. It was the easiest decision I ever made in my life. At the same time, it was the hardest decision I've ever made. New York meant so much to me as a place because in my personal life, I was a young professional. I moved to New York and I was young and up and coming. I didn't have a college degree, but I came to New York because I saw the promise of opportunity in New York. And I know it sounds cheesy, it sounds cliche, whatever. Like, I saw there as being a certain element of promise there. I looked at New York City and I said, that's a city of 8 million people. And if there's 8 million people that want to live there, that means there's 8 million opportunities there. And there's people coming and going every day. That means there must be an opportunity for me there. And I'm going to be real with y'all. Like, where I grew up like in a total suburban like environment. I lived in a very like regular American suburb. It was not an urban kind of environment. Like, the thought of living in an apartment building was so far and away distant to me and my family and our upbringing. But I saw images of New York in movies and stuff, and I had this idea that it was like this crazy concrete place. Like, how are you gonna make it there? Like, to be honest, like my perception of living in New York was this was a place for like fools to go to, like overly zealous people, like people who I don't want to like be disrespectful or anything. Like, I saw it as a place, like the type of people who want to go to Hollywood and they're working as a waiter or whatever, handing out their screenplay, like, you know, hey, help me get a gig. All right, that was my perception of what it meant to be to someone who moves to New York. The type of person who moves to New York is the type of person who tries to become an actor. Like, I mean, you gotta have a lot of chutzpah to try that kind of thing, right? But the reason I moved to New York was because I was looking for opportunity. I was looking to become a professional. I was looking for the right career. I was looking to get an advanced degree. I had all these ideas, and I thought New York City is the type of place where you could stumble into some restaurant or bar or whatever, and you see an executive who works at a major firm, and you just make some small talk, and then bam, a door opens. And I'm not gonna say it's always like that, but it can be. You know, living in New York is incredibly intimidating at first. I think, you know, there's that kind of rush, there's that excitement for the young professional, for the person who comes to the city, who's looking for an experience. They're looking to be in this big concrete playground for adults, and that is essentially what it is. I mean, it's if you're looking to broaden your career pool, if you're looking to broaden the pool of people who you could date, if you're looking to broaden your social sphere or your access to entertainment or activities or just a wider social network, if you just want to live in a city where you can meet up with people who are into anything. Like, let's say you're into hang gliding. There's probably a hang gliding group in New York City. There's something for everyone in New York. So, like, let's say you live in a small town in New England or the American South, wherever, and you're in a city of 200,000 people. Maybe you have let's say you're into skydiving, for example. Actually, this might be a poor example because that's something that's easier to do outside of a major city, but it still works. There might be one skydiving place within an hour and a half of the place that you live in, I don't know, Louisiana or whatever. And you go to that place and that's fine for you, whatever. But let's say you want to meet more people who are into skydiving. Maybe extreme sports are very important to you. Maybe whatever. You move to New York, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, whoa, I'm in a metropolis, and there's all sorts of young, middle-aged, and old people of all walks who happen to also be into that hobby. And they go out to Long Island, and they go to New Jersey, and they go to this other place outside of the city. And you just have this total crossroads of different people who are into different hobbies. And as cliche as it may sound, there is something for everyone in New York. New York City is a jewelry box of glimmering opportunity. It really is. And you have to see it as that to be there. You have to be a dreamer, basically. You essentially have to be like those overzealous people who you would think of as being a little bit foolhardy, who have the audacity to do a crazy thing like moving to Hollywood with no connections, just hoping that they're going to get an acting deal or something like that. That's essentially what you have to be when moving to New York, except the difference is it's not that foolish. I'll say that again. It is actually not foolish to move to New York City without a job or without what, I mean, I'll temper that. You do have to have some kind of plan to get there. But I'm going to tell you one thing. Once you're there, depending on what field you're trying to get into professionally, or what school you're at, university or otherwise that you're trying to attend, or a business that you're trying to start up, as long as you have a plan that you can execute, more opportunity will come once you're there, right? And I know that's scary. I know that's a difficult promise to hear and to believe in, right? But once you make the decision to move to New York, like I did, and you start talking to people, you start meeting friends. Now, I'm not saying this is automatic for everybody that moves to New York, but if you move to New York and you take advantage of all that New York City has to offer, you're going to find, like I did, you know, if you put yourself out there, if you go on meetup.com and look up professional meetup, young professionals meetup in New York City, that there'll be a bar somewhere in the downtown or midtown or whatever, and you'll show up on a Thursday night and there'll be 200 people there, and they all want to talk to you. It's like there's something in the New York culture that, like, it's just a place where people recognize that others are looking for opportunity, and it's like people are taught that, like, well, hey, if I give out opportunity, things will come back to me, and let me help others. It's like there's this perception of New York City as being like a standoffish, or I don't know, like it's a mean environment, or like people are cold or harsh or whatever the case. Maybe there's something to that, but my experience has been the total opposite. New Yorkers, Manhattanites, people in Brooklyn, they love when they meet someone else who is an audacious dreamer that wants opportunity, that wants to become a business person. They love to meet that, because when they encounter it in another person, especially someone brand new to New York, they feed off of that. They're like, I'm not the only one. Okay, great. You know, it's funny you should say that. I know you're trying to get into software development, or you're trying to get an associate finance junior position at one of the firms downtown. Let me tell you something. I want to help you get your foot in the door. I don't know somebody, but I do know a guy who knows a guy who can point you in the right direction. Tell you what, let's exchange LinkedIn's or business cards or whatever. And it's a place where if you can be there physically, the opportunity will come. And you may listen to this today in August of 2023 and say, well, gosh, I don't know. Whatever. This guy sounds authoritative. Let me follow his advice. He moves to New York. And then 6 months later, in March of 2024, you're like living in the cheapest apartment you can find, a 200 square foot little studio in the East Village or whatever. And you're like, what the hell was I thinking? Nothing's clicking for me. You have to go there. First of all, you have to get there. You have to find a place to live once you're there. My recommendation of moving to New York, live in the city center. You know, a lot of people will say, oh, you need to be in the suburbs, you need to be way out in Queens, you need to be in New Jersey or whatever. I say live in the city. Live in the city if you can. If you can find a way. It's hard. It's getting harder and harder. It always is. The rents are always going up. Same thing since the 80s, since the 70s. It's always been that way. New York has always been incredibly expensive. But if you can get there, and if you can have a pad, even if it's the smallest little place in the world, if you're a young person, if you're young with no kids, you can do this. I promise you. You know, maybe it means finding a hustle, getting into something, multiple streams of income, whatever. But if you get there and just try it for a year. And once you're there, even if you're a little bit lost in life and you don't know exactly what field you want to be in, you don't know whether you want to get into finance or the arts or the performing arts, or maybe you're interested in medicine or whatever the case. You don't know what you want to study. You know, maybe you're just looking to get a decent business job. If you're unsure of what you want to do and you're just looking to get a decent $70,000 a year job, a year of living in New York, you'll find it. You'll find it. You know, you might even find it as someone without even having a bachelor's degree. If that's what you're after, you know, in my case, I was in the military before I moved to New York. So for me, it was a little bit of a different situation. So I had, you know, I was attending a school and I was using military benefits to pay for my tuition there. And they also assisted me with a partial housing stipend while I attended that school. So for me, I had that. And I understand that's a resource that not everybody has. But if you can find something like that, if you can find an internship to get you that will pay for your housing while you're there, or if you can find an internship and then get a service job or something to cover your rent and just get a pad and just get there. If you really are hungry for opportunity, if you're hungry for developing your ability to network, developing your finding yourself. I mean, as cheesy as that might sound, you want to find yourself a little bit sometimes. Everybody's at different places. Some people are discerning what they want to do for a profession. Some people are discerning what they want to do. They're already in a certain industry, but they don't know which company they want to stay with or whatever, or whether they want to live urban, rural. Some people are work from homers, you know. Everybody's situation is different, but if you're looking to unlock potential and growth, and if you're looking for enrichment and you're looking for urban, if you want to experiment with urban life, I say go the whole hog and just move to Manhattan, and it will unlock so much for you. Like I said, I lived in New York for about 4 years, and I was the type of person that I loved the city. I loved interacting with people from all walks of life. I love how random New York is. I love how people wear crazy stuff out in the streets. I love how you can just sit there and people watch and you just see crazy stuff. There's even, I mean, there are people who, you know, you have your touristy areas like Times Square and, you know, the Battery or Statue of Liberty, whatever kind of stuff. But by and large, New York is basically an enormous carpet of urban sprawl with something for everyone. You know, you've got the ritzy place, the Upper East Side. You've got the, you know, old school artsy people on the Upper West Side who go to operas down at Lincoln Center. You've got the, you know, the Broadway community all through Midtown. You know, you've got your crazy people who are insanely rich, who you don't have any clue how they got to be so rich, and they live in all these high rises in Hudson Yards with all these brand new 5-star Michelin star restaurants, and you wonder where these young professionals get all their money. You know, you've got your executives who live up in Westchester who commute in during the week. You see them going to all these finance jobs and having FIDI. Even post-pandemic, even post whatever, with all the work from home and stuff like that, that vibe, that energy, that drive is still there. Now, I'm speaking to you today as somebody who left New York over a year ago, and I'll be very frank with you, I miss it. I miss a lot about New York. Now, I'm not going to get into my whole life story, but I left New York for a career opportunity. I left New York because I saw there as being more potential for me for a very particular opportunity that I couldn't do in New York. Now, I understand it's not going to be everybody's situation. But I do think there's a common thread there that you come to New York, you live there, and some people stay for a lifetime. I would have stayed for a lifetime if I could. Because I love, like I said, I mean, I don't want to go on a rant here, but I love the randomness of it. I love the craziness of it. I love I just love the color of New York. I love the opportunity, there's such an abundance there. And I just want to encourage that for other people. So ultimately, you have to decide what it is that what your appetite is. If you think you might want to live there, if I can give you some advice on how to do that, on getting to New York, finding an apartment. I'll save that for another video. But today, I want to explain kind of the why behind why I traveled to New York, and what it meant to me, and how this concept of you get there, and once you're there, as they say, if you build it, they will come, right? And it's getting there. It's having a New York address on your resume at the top of your CV that you're there, and telling people I live here in the city. You're like I said, you're at a network event, right? And you're talking to people, and we want opportunity. You want to tell people what you want to do, where you came from, or what you're about. And they're like, okay, well, where are you now? And you're like, oh, it's funny you should ask. I'm actually here in the city, Yeah, I mean, having that address of being in Manhattan, or showing people that you're in New York already, it's half the battle. And once you have it, it's like, the world is your oyster, and people see you as a New Yorker, and they're willing to throw opportunity at you, and they know you're not going to be dealing with some crazy commute from 3 hours away. And, like I said, I can't emphasize it enough. That's half the battle. Is just simply getting to New York. Now, if you have kids, if you're married, whatever, then all of this is very complicated. I think the advice I'm giving out is actually tailored more towards young, single, college kids looking to make it to the city, maybe, or other people like myself coming out of the military, considering living in New York. And it's also tailored towards people who are up and coming in their careers. And I think that's the type of person who should move to New York, quite frankly. The city is very hostile. The older you get, the more you have going on, the more commitments you have in life, the bigger of a family you have, if you have a family. And ultimately, it can become simply untenable. It can become very difficult. And there are a lot of opportunities outside of New York. But for the young, up-and-coming person, for the person looking to find themselves, looking to become worldly, to become cultured, to appreciate things, to be able to talk intelligently about, certain forms of entertainment, or different types of cultures, to become well-traveled. Many New Yorkers are incredibly well-traveled. I would say if you're just simply looking to grow as a person, to consider living in the Big Apple. And, like I said, there are downsides, there are difficulties, there are logistical considerations, major considerations before making that move. And I'm going to follow up with another video to talk about exactly how you can go about living in New York, or if you've never even visited New York, but for maybe like 1 or 2 2-day trips, what would it look like to go there and to find an apartment, and how can you interpret the map of the city and say, well, yeah, that neighborhood looks interesting, or that looks close. How is that? I know it's a 45-minute commute from that area, but how difficult is that commute really, or how much walking is there really? And the intricacies of that, those are all questions that you've got to have figured out, and you got to have a game plan for when you get there. My strategy was to live in the city center, to live as close to Midtown as I could, at the income that I had at the time. Not everybody is in a position to do that. I understand that. But, for the young, up-and-coming person, for the person looking to find themselves, looking to become worldly, to become cultured, to appreciate things, to be able to talk intelligently about, I do think that there are many people who would benefit. I would go so far as to say, even if it doesn't overly appeal to you, even if you're someone who's like, I'd rather have horses out in Wyoming, and that's my idea of heaven, then I still, for that person, I think they would be enriched by having lived in New York. And I know we all have family members. There's people who dump on New York. New York is in the news because of the crime, because of the big city problems that New York has, right? And we can discuss all that. I do think too much is made of all those problems. I think it's a very politicized kind of thing. And I think that it's not New York the way people talk about, oh, it used to be way worse in the 1970s or whatever. It's not quite that. There are problems there. I don't ignore that. I don't deny it. But I do still think you can hang around quite a few really good parts and with a very low level of danger. You do need to be aware. You need to be aware of the cost of things and how to mitigate those costs and how to deal with all the challenges that go with big city life. But I think in those discussions, too often we overlook the good, the benefit that, and that this was, again, going back to my own personal anecdotal experience, is when I moved to New York, I was coming from a small town in Connecticut. And I was very far, I'm talking about the far side of Connecticut, like way out southeast Connecticut. So I came to New York with a set of problems. I had interests, I had hobbies at the time that I could not fulfill. I had career aspirations that there was no way I could fulfill in the town that I was living in at the time. So New York was kind of a necessary move for me in order to grow in those endeavors. But going back to the, like I said, the challenges and the costs of living in New York, part of my discernment process was, well, if other people are willing to pay so much money, I kind of developed this fascination of just going onto YouTube or onto whatever and looking at these on Realtor.com or whatever the case, looking at these listings of apartments and how much a New York City apartment costs. And I was just blown away at the time. Like, you can charge $1,700 for a little room, and those numbers are even higher now. And I was just amazed that that these New York City landlords could command so much money. That there was that will, because that means people are willing to pay those amounts. If they're charging that much, people are paying it. And so I became fascinated with this question. Why are people paying so much money to live there? They're paying that amount of money for a myriad of reasons. And you discover that, I think, when you experiment with having lived in New York. So I'll leave it at that. Like I said, I'm going to follow up with more content about how to actually carry out the process. In a less kind of cheesy way. I know people have done other content on this, but I do think it bears talking about. It's a topic that I'm passionate about, as you can tell, and I have a lot to say on it. So, for now, I wish you all the best, and we'll talk more about urban life and all that goes with it. Peace.